Right, I guess we get to say hello again. Hello, and welcome to this, whatever this is, this staged event, this conversation, to Delicious Salad.
Hello.
I don't want to ask like what is VR, but I think it's important that we establish who you are to VR and what your relationship to it is.
Sure. So definitely since like the days when like Valve and HTC partnered to release the Vive or whatever, um, I tried it. I think like a year after that came out, I was in uni, and then like that just kind of really sparked something in me. And I was like, yeah, like this is something I really want to like work in. And basically since then, that's just kind of been my area of focus.
What have you?
And hmm?
I mean, you said you mentioned it when you were at college or university or something like that ilk. Presumably, up till that point, you'd been doing some sort of coding, but not in VR.
Right. So essentially, that's what I was at school for. It was for like coding, like computer sciencey stuff. And then,
Okay.
yeah, someone just on the campus was toying with the Vive, and I got to try the lab from the demo that Valve made
Oh yeah,
back
yeah.
when
The
they
lab,
released
yeah.
that. Yeah. So I tried that for the first time. I remember like there was that the Dota 2 like secret shop thing, and also
Yeah,
like the Portal 2 like animation.
yeah.
And I just remember like being so like amazed by that.
I think there was a, I want to say Elites. One of the variations on Elites were the space flying sim. A mate of mine had VR headset and flew and had all of the joysticks and rudders and all the things that you can use to sort of fly these vehicles and set up like the voice commands to make various things happen. And this was before they were married. And they would sit there and play this game for hours on ends. The same way that I play Team Fortress 2, but they would play this game. But they're in their entire like VR world. And so far as they were concerned, there was almost a break between reality and VR. Whenever they put the headset on, that was them. They were in this inaccessible world. Presumably, is that the sort of thing that you experienced when you first experienced VR? Is that what got you hooked, or was it more of a sort of a challenge of trying to work within this brand new technology?
Definitely a mixture of both. Like since that it was, yeah, right. If like trying it then and then kind of like getting into it, um, I felt very captivated, and I knew like not those like first few years, like I was like trying like all this stuff that was getting made at the time. It was like, yeah, it was like very new, very fresh, and like nowadays, like a lot of stuff like looking back was very, very simple, very tech demoing, and I feel like we're definitely
Hmm.
capable of a lot more now.
That's interesting. I mean, I think the general furore around VR when it first came out, or when sort of the days of the Oculus Rift, like the first headsets. I don't even know what year that was. 2000 something.
Yeah, I think 2016 is when those headsets all started.
Okay, so in the early days, from my perspective, VR was stick a headset on and look around. Ooh, I'm here. What can you do in VR now that you could never do then? What's easier? What's fresh?
So from like a software perspective, just the level of experience that you could get, like I'm sure you know what Half-Life Alyx is. I'm sure everyone here probably knows what that is. Like
Yeah, I know
that's
what Half-Life Alyx is. Yeah.
yeah. Like I feel like that's a really good example of like even now, even though it came out like 5 years ago at this point, like to me that's still such a benchmark that I feel like doesn't get hit a lot. And I feel like there's good reasons for that. I think it's definitely still a like small industry, definitely growing, but still small.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
so not a lot of AAA funding goes into it at this point. Still, I would still call this sort of the early days in a way.
I'm trying to think of the Apple headset, whatever that's called, but that was all sort of like how do I mix the the real world and put like overlay screens onto it. So it's interesting that there is still a community around VR, that there's still a thing, and it's still as vibrant as it ever was, if not growing. Would you say that's correct? Is it a growing environment, or has it stagnated, or has everything moved to XR?
No, I would definitely say it's been growing pretty steadily. XR2, I think I do like the mixed reality stuff. I think that's a good sort of extension to this. And it all does sort of fall under the same umbrella because they do kind of run on the same base. So like for example, like on this mod, I'm using something called OpenXR to put bring it up to like a modern standard, make sure it runs on all the headsets and all the different run times. But that
Was going to ask about that.
encompasses, yep, that does encompass both the VR stuff that's completely immersive and also the mixed reality. It can kind of be blended together.
I think we're gonna like head very rapidly towards the weed, so may as well go there anyway. The mod that you were first brought to my attention for was the Team Fortress 2 mod. Obviously, I'm a Team Fortress 2 guy, so you're planning on, or you're currently working on a TF2 mod, using the TF2 SDK that's been recently released. And your idea is to make VR possible, viable, useful, cool within the TF2 sphere.
Yes. So,
I realize that a lot of my questions aren't questions, so jump in at any time.
okay, no worries. So yeah, there was. This does tie into this too. There was this team of guys. I believe they're called the Source VR mod team, made up of shout out to Cabalistic and Worm Slayer and the rest of those guys, who made a VR mod for Half-Life 2. And that does run off the same Source SDK base that they've updated now to include TF2.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to, at the very least, bring TF2 to that level. Of course, have it be it'll be online capable. And yeah, giving it that full motion control treatment, being able to gain on sites you wish. I do want to also kind of shout out the guys. There's a mod for a game called Contractors VR.
Right.
Yep, where they have done a ton of work, like putting a bunch of TF2 assets into the game and like bringing the mechanics as like close as possible. And honestly, like I see like just the level of effort that's going into that. It's like if you want to play TF2 like VR right now while this mod's being worked on, like that's the way to go.
So obviously, I've got a ton of questions about the mod that you want to create. First of all, give me some tense here. Is it something that you are currently creating, you want to create, or you've got it as somewhere in between?
So it is something I am creating. I have something running right now. But this right now currently is sort of like a restoration of the DK2 VR mode. So basically,
TF2 used to have a version of Team Fortress 2 that worked and was usable.
Yep. So a lot of that leftover VR code was in there. What essentially I had to do to get that mode working again was just kind of replace some low-level parts that talk about how it's communicating with the VR device, essentially. But it's at a point where that mode is pretty much restored and fully playable, and you can like host servers and stuff and play. The only major thing that's not working is the sniper scope, which is something that's probably gonna have to get reworked completely in the sort of the version I want to do of this. Head tracking is working. How this version of the VR thing that Valve did originally, it was like your head is where the character's like world model is, and like you see everything, and you're sort of centered around that point. I can imagine this is probably pretty nausea-inducing for a lot of people. So this is definitely not like where I want this mod to be. I see someone in the in the chat asked about 6 DoF versus 3 DoF, and I'm definitely going for like a 6 DoF, like fully motion controlled experience. Like
Okay,
basically,
explain to me. You've said it now. I don't know what DoF
oh
means.
sorry,
DOF.
degrees of freedom. So basically, like being able to both move around in space and rotate your head. So like right now, this is kind of a 3 DoF experience instead of a 6 DoF because positionally you don't get really to move much.
Right. I mean, presumably, my perception of what a VR experience should be is you don't have to walk in the direction that you're facing. As in, you can look to your side and move forward. Also,
that's something really interesting you bring up.
You can shoot in one direction that you're not looking in.
Yes,
I think it's probably so. Those two, your hands are not fixed to your positioning of your head.
Correct.
And is that the sort of differentiation between 3 DoF and 6 DoF, or 3 degrees or 6 degrees?
I would say like from an experiential standpoint, yes. Like it's a very different feeling.
Right.
And this, yeah, like this. So this is still mouse and keyboard controlled as well. This doesn't have like the motion controller support at this point.
Okay. Right. So, I mean, just a whole world of possibilities opened up here. So the thing that we're currently looking at the screen is effectively it's not necessarily your project. It's Valve's project that you've kind of reopened. Is it your intent to fix this first and then go on to your own mod, or are these two things going to be running in parallel, or are you just using this as a reference?
Right. So this is sort of my baseline. I would want to call it. Right, is to get this working again, and the reason so it didn't start this way. Originally, it was something I kind of like hacked together without, just kind of like getting like really excited, like getting into it. And then I basically have since like taken a step back and being like, okay, like how can I like work this into the engine better? And actually like reached out to the HL2 VR guys who were willing to share their code and like basically speed up the process a lot more to get this part working. And basically, cool. Since this is, I'm pretty much done with this. Again, like I said, it's just the sniper scope that's not working, and I do want to do a little bit of optimization in the rendering. But after that, yeah, I want to get right into like getting the guns to follow your hands and like like you say, like being able to move separately from like where your arm is pointing, and that concept of like turning into like a real like VR shooter with a lot of the VR shooter mechanics that people like and are familiar with if they know about that sort of thing.
So, I mean, I spoke about it at the beginning about the idea of being stood up and having controllers on your hands as opposed to a mouse and keyboard being sat down in a chair. Do you envisage, certainly for this version, for the remake of Valve's VR, are you using mouse and keyboard, or are you using controllers for it? And then what more widely onto your TF2 VR mod? Do you intend for players to stand up and wave their arms around, or alternatively to do a sort of a hybrid experience with one and the other, and then a bit of everything?
Right. So I would say from like a mechanical standpoint, from like how it plays, I'm definitely aiming for it to feel like Half-Life Alyx in the sense I feel like the weapon switching from that feels appropriate.
Yeah.
As opposed to maybe like having to pull things off your body and like hoist them. I feel like that ends a bit of friction that I think a lot of people don't want to deal with. It's mechanic. I definitely want to like work out a lot of things. Nothing's really like set in stone yet. I feel like there's gonna be a lot of fun sort of like design challenges, especially with particular weapons going into this. That I'm really excited about.
My brain is immediately going to the heavy and the fact that the heavy shoots bullets out of his eyes. So the heavy doesn't, although he has a big gun, technically he shoots out of his eyes. So he can stand behind a big signpost and shoot over the top of it, just wherever his head can see, his eyes can fire from. So
Right.
yeah, I can fully imagine there'll be lots of design challenges of that ilk and similar.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I kind of want to get a gauge an idea of the sort of timeline you expect to be effective for producing your own mod, the TF2 VR mod. Presumably, it's going to be called TF2 VR. I'm not putting that out of the ether.
Yeah, that's probably the name I'm sticking with. I mean, I even like made a little. This is kind of like a
Oh,
mock-up logo for it. Just
nice.
but
We'll have to use that on the show notes.
yeah, I'm really excited
So,
about really getting into this.
are you thinking? I mean, presumably you're going to be doing this sort of in and around your working week. You know, this isn't going to be you haven't secured additional funding to make this your 24/7
Yeah,
this your job.
yeah. As of now, this is just like something I'm doing on the side.
Okay. Which opens the question: how many? I mean, I've spoken to a number of developers, and they all they think in hours. So how many hours of work do you think it'll be to get like a working version or an alpha version of this mod built?
If you're talking about sort of like my vision for this, I say it's
Yeah.
very early to put, I think, a solid number on
Okay. Okay. You're definitely speaking like a developer then.
that.
But if
I have my
you,
own sort of idea in mind, maybe based around a particular when a particular thing releases, but like uh, we know nothing about this particular thing and like when
okay,
it'll come
okay.
out. So
Oh
um
wow. Are we talking hardware, software? What are we talking?
yeah.
Yeah, it's not an answer.
I don't want to I don't want to put a solid date on anything, but
Okay.
I will say I do want to keep regular progress updates out. I
Okay.
don't want to be the type of person that's just gonna be like, oh yeah, like I'm working on this thing and then like nothing ever happens.
Right.
So
Yeah.
um
So presumably the idea is to put up a blog or to put up some sort of thing on Twitter or
yeah, I think
on Blue
I
Sky or
might I'll put up a second like Twitter account and then occasionally
okay.
post different updates if I like have any implementation for like a weapon that's really cool or even just in those early stages, just oh hey guys, I got the gun attached to the hand. We like
Yeah.
just little things
Yeah.
just to keep people in the loop. And
Cool.
also I'm definitely open
Yeah.
to people's ideas and like if they think that they could contribute something in like models or anything like that, like yeah, just reach out. I definitely don't want this
Yeah.
to just be like, oh yeah, it's got to be just me.
I,
That's not the
I
vibe I
was
want
going
to
to
give
ask
up.
about that. Like the
Okay.
idea that you have come to this all fresh faced and hey, let's do a thing is great, but it's very clear that it's just you at the moment. I've spoken to a number of other TF2 SDK modder type people, particularly the pre-Fortress guys and the parkour Fortress guys. Like that, they are a group of people, and they're very used to working as a group of people, and their sort of workflows exist with an expectation that somebody will be doing the audio for this, and somebody will be doing the kind of the code for this, and someone will do the art for this. It has that. Obviously, you have you're able to do everything, but you would like to work with other people. Have you set anything up, or do you have an idea of how you want to set up a process to allow to sort of onboard new staff into various roles in this, or am I getting to this just far too soon for you to have made any decisions?
Um, yeah, I mean these are great points to bring up, and definitely things that I've been thinking about. I have no formal process yet, but I do see sort of like a way to like um basically like know what I'm looking for. I suppose I have a couple friends I know that are good at doing some like 3D stuff, but like I could
Yeah,
definitely see a value in like having someone that does like 2D graphic design because like I
yeah,
I'm okay at that, but like, I know like it could be like way better. Just if it's keep it like a community thing. If people are like, wow, I really want to like TF2 like VR thing, that sounds awesome. I want to contribute to that. How can I contribute to that? You know, like
Yeah.
just kind of tell me like what you want to do, and if they're like, oh yeah, like that makes sense. Like yeah, welcome aboard.
Cool. Do you have like at least a Discord or something of that nature yet?
No, and I think what I'll do, there is, I'll have to talk with them, but there is the Flat to VR Discord. I think I might set up shop in there
Yeah,
and keep it as like in that community. I
not a
feel
bad
like
idea.
yeah, it's especially since yeah, like that's where the Half-Life 2 VR home is as well. So I think I should keep up tradition there and keep it open.
I think that theirs was the post on Twitter that I initially responded to. So yeah, I think having an existing community that you can utilize or you can be part of or experience through their eyes. That's a great idea. There's no. You sort of mentioned having a 2D guy. I think it's much better that you offload the process of having a community guy to people who already have communities. Otherwise, you end up spending half your time doing something completely different from the job that's actually at hand. Um, at least that's the argument that Valve have always given for not giving blog updates. So, follow in their footsteps, eh?
Sorry.
So, I think the reason that I wanted to bring up TF2 VR mod like so quickly into the conversation was that there's so many things that are particular and unique to the TF2 VR mod that you can't really sort of talk about otherwise. But you did mention open XR, open VR, the idea of like playing or creating a VR content that is not specifically directed at a singular headset. Um, is that something you already have previous experience building with or around or in?
Sorry, I don't think I quite grasped that. Can you repeat?
Yeah. Do you previously have experience building stuff for open? I think it's Open XR or Open VR, the
Oh
framework.
yeah, yes. I was so this was sort of a nice dive into doing some like low level like API programming. But in
Mm,
terms of like using OpenXR, a lot of my work is like done in like Unreal Engine or like Unity.
right.
So that's where
Which
the majority of my VR
yeah,
expertise comes from, I suppose.
I mean that's going to be a question that is really relevant here, then, or response is really relevant here because obviously the TF2 SDK is built in Steam or Source, I should say. So again, I question like your experience. Have you worked with Source before? Do you think that you would do initial testing in Unity or in another language and then try and implicate it or try and implement it in Source, or are you going to try working in Source as base?
You know, that is something I have thought about. And it's something that I don't know until I feel like I start getting into like the gun implementation mechanics and stuff like that. As I feel like um I know hammer's a thing, but I feel like
Yeah,
the level of I could probably like iterate in a newer engine quickly, get the idea down, and then transfer that to source. I think there's definitely
yeah,
a value there. Um, I will say I don't have a lot of like direct experience like programming like in source, but I do use C++ a lot, so that's like not foreign to me. So a lot of my time has been spent like reading like the game code and the engine code and like trying to understand it. Um, but I'd say that's been going well because that's what led to where it's at now.
yeah. It's definitely showing results already. It's quite impressive, to be perfectly honest. I can't even imagine how I would go about doing even a third of what you've been able to achieve as like a just an idea, a burst of idea. So yeah, congratulations.
Thanks.
Welcome to the bizarre world of Source, I guess. Um, I, I think the part of what I see with newer, younger, or less experienced programmers, where they get a start in making something in source and then eventually go into a different framework, a different platform, is that the skills that they built on one language directly transfer to another. But a lot of people don't stay as their career develops in the platform they started off with. In particular, in case of Source, do you think that maybe you are wasting your time, apart from the fact that it's going to be you're going to end up with a product that is something that a lot of people will draw a lot of fun and adventure from, but does it feel like sunken time learning how to do stuff in Source, learning how to do stuff in Hammer?
Um, I don't really see it that way. Like I think it's just like a different way of doing things. I guess some people would say some of the stuff is outdated, but I don't know. I've just been kind of deriving a lot of enjoyment just out of learning how one of my favorite games growing up is put together. So that's kind of driving this. I will say too that there was a long period of time where like I didn't play TF2. It's like so I was my sort of heyday was during like around like the engineer update. So like that was
Oh, that's
probably
going
where a
back.
majority of my hours went. Yeah. Uh, so it's been really
I'm
interesting
with
to
you now.
see a lot of the content that I completely missed out on, like all these really cool maps that were added. So it's been really like a joy just experiencing those for the first time while wearing the headset. Speaking
Wow.
of, yeah,
Okay.
any map that works on vanilla TF2 should be working in this out of the box. There's nothing I've seen yet that indicates there's anything broken on that front. Um, so that's good to know. I know it's something like, at least with like the contractors mod, you have to like individually port each map, and I can understand that could probably be a pain.
Okay. I mean, genuinely very impressive to see, like even as much as you've created so far, and actually kind of looking forward to seeing like what you're able to develop. One thing that I'm like the spark that's going off in my head at the moment, something you mentioned very beginning of this conversation, was the idea of having like a multiplayer environment. Is that something that you? I mean, Team Fortress 2, to my mind, is only fun when you're playing with other people.
Of course.
Yeah. So, do I, I don't even know how to phrase this, because I can't even imagine a scenario where anyone would want to play Team Fortress 2 on their own as a single player experience. But then I guess that's an easier thing to develop for than a multiplayer experience. But then the TF2 source code, surely that allows you to do multiplayer as well.
Yep.
Have you like do you perceive the TF2 VR mod as being something that needs to have a multiplayer element? And if
Absolutely.
it does, yeah, yeah, okay. I'm glad we're on the same page for that. But in that regard, how do you imagine players will interact? Are you perceiving there be like a funnel that'll force people into the red or blue teams, or there'll be some sort of choice? So again, is this a conversation that's far too soon? You need to have the base game before you can even consider what to do with multiple players.
Okay, so I mean, I can speak to a few things. Like, I definitely want to see, and this should be doable because like Source supports IK and all this. Like, being able to see like people's other players' arm movements, and they can like gesture and stuff like that. Basically,
Yep.
um, you can taunt without having to like press the taunt button. I will say that I do want to support you being able to use taunts still. So you get the voice clips out of those and things like that,
Yeah.
or maybe you have some kind of like taunt detection system. There's a lot of fun ideas to play with for sure. Um, I think Half-Life Alyx is probably going to be my biggest pull for sure. I feel like there's a lot done there in terms of mixing like a system that feels good with
Yeah.
accessibility, and I think that would be a really good thing to adapt for this game.
The movement of Half-Life Alyx is if I
Ah,
want to go there,
that's
I'm moving there.
okay. I do want to mention that that's an important. Okay, that you bring up a really important thing.
Yep.
I'm thinking so this game is probably not going to support teleport. I think that would be a very hard thing to do, and also
apart from the
balance.
teleporter.
Oh,
Well,
right, man, it gets not the
yeah.
engineer's teleporter, but like VR teleporting.
Okay. So you won't just be sort of teleport. You won't just get, I want to be there, and then immediately you're there.
Right, so
Yeah.
this is definitely going to be a game based around like smooth locomotion, but I do want to have like vignetting. There are ways to like mitigate motion sickness in a smooth locomotion setting.
Okay. These are. I'm glad you're mentioning them, but it sounds like they are. Like the very nature of saying things like smooth locomotion. That is not a. Those are not two words that I would generally associate when I'm trying to talk about movement in games. Is that a gaming term? Is that a VR term?
It's a VR term, and it basically just means like moving like you normally would in a shooter. So like you press WASD and you're moving smoothly.
Yeah.
You're not teleporting or blinking around. You're playing the game as sort of like how it was put together.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I think people take for granted in first person shooters, particularly in Team Fortress 2. As you say, the ability to sort of press a key and run in that direction, never getting tired, never getting exerted. Head stays more or less fixed in the same location. There's your arms do exactly as you want them to. You can crouch and jump and fire across
Yeah,
a ravine. The locomotion, as you describe it, is something that as a PC gamer I'm both used to and expect from any game that I play. But within the VR environments, you're like every time that your brain tells you because it's seeing with its eyes that you're doing a thing, your body tells you that you should also be doing that thing as well. And if there's not, if you're physically stood still, but your brain is telling you that you're moving forward, then it tends to induce motion sickness. But as you say, that there's ways of mitigating that. How does that sort of translate? Half-Life Alyx gets over it by doing the teleport. How have other games or other applications overcome this fairly complex difficulty?
there's I feel like there is a lot to be said about like the motion sickness issue, because I feel like that's definitely one of the bigger things in sort of like the VR space to address. Um, I will say like a mixture of things have made it better. So both on like the software side, like introducing things like if you're doing like a smooth motion and you put a little like black vignette around the edges of the display, that can help some people.
Huh.
Some people get just kind of used to it over time and they just develop a tolerance for it. Um, Headsets also, it seems that headsets with higher refresh rates, people tend to feel better in as well. So it's just something that I think over time, just on all sort of sides of the industry, we're trying to figure out like, okay, how can we do like fun, like convincing motions without making people sick and detracting from the experience?
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to ask about sort of new technology and new VR headsets, and I guess the world has moved on from its sort of 640 by 480 kind of one screen per eye kind of thing. Are you going to be? I know that you mentioned we've talked about it already about the OpenXR thing, but do you use a particular headset when you're creating stuff? Are you going to be if you're going to be testing on that one headset, then do you have others that you test with as well? Like, how do you make sure that everything is as good for one person as it is for someone else?
Yep, very good question. So the two headsets I mainly test with currently is I have Quest 3, which I think one a lot of people will be familiar with, um, and the Big Screen Beyond, which is
Yep.
yeah, really nice, like small PCVR focused high resolution headset. I think it's a very good example of like where things are heading. Um,
Yeah. In fact, it's the Beyond headset that I saw the video on recently and was sort of blown away. It has that kind of Ready Steady, Ready Player One kind of vibe to it, where it's just a relatively discreet, apparently quite small but really high performance headset.
Yeah, they just announced their second iteration, and it looks very good, to say the
It's
least.
very tight, yeah, for sure. And I guess that's sort of the idea is to be able to get it working on at least like a relatively small spectrum of headsets or of equipment, and then hope that there's enough interest for you to um, validate additional headsets or perhaps additional testers within your community have other equipment that they can test it with.
So one big advantage of doing OpenXR though is that it should address most of the problems. I can confirm already that it's working on both Steam VR and the Oculus runtime without any noticeable issues. So I'm
Nice.
already, being wary of that. I want to make sure pretty much anyone with any headset playing on PC. Yeah. One thing I have to mention, I kind of have to. I feel like this will probably get asked at some point. This cannot be ported to Quest standalone. Valve will probably not allow that. It seems like if you're going to make a TF2 mod and release it, you have to release it on Steam, and that's it. So I just want to put that out there.
It's worth saying, but I think you're absolutely 100% correct on that one. Anyway, that they've allowed the. I can imagine one of the reasons why they've allowed TF2 SDK to exist in the first place was to get over the problem people were having with intellectual property or wanting to release stuff that they had made for Team Fortress 2 or of Team Fortress 2 or from Team Fortress 2, but not having the ability to do so. And I think IP is one of the things that's going to lock it to the Steam platform. But again, you're talking about a user base of 50 million, 100 million, very big user base. So presumably that's. Do you find, as someone working in the VR space, do you find that a lot of people who use VR are on Steam, or do you think they're more within the Meta environment or Epic or elsewhere?
I'll answer this with, I think the most people that are really into like the PC VR stuff are on Steam, but overall Meta has the bigger market, more people using it.
Yeah.
I think especially, I guess, the kind of thing that's been like selling over like Christmas and stuff. So a lot of like kids are playing like Gorilla Tag and stuff and getting into all that.
Yeah.
So overall it's bigger, but I think the really dedicated, I guess, quote unquote, like hardcore crowd is on Steam. And I think there's always a lot of cool stuff happening in that space, I feel.
Cool.
It kind of feels like a peek into the future in a way.
So, speaking of like shared realities, one question that came up from a previous interview I did with the Parkour Fortress guys, that they sort of wanted to pick your brain about, is the idea of doing sort of Parkour Fortress. I don't know if you're aware of this.
Yeah,
it's like
I used
Mirror's
to play
Edge,
it.
but
Yeah,
oh, cool.
yeah.
Oh, nice. But doing that in a VR with a VR headset on or in a VR environment, is that something that you could imagine yourself, either you going over and helping them to achieve that, or working on a collaborative effort, or bringing in some sort of parkour element into TF2 VR? Could you see that crossover happening?
Thinking about that makes me excited. I think that'd be really cool.
Nice.
There's this VR game called Stride that's like a parkour game in VR, and I think that's like one of my favorites. So I'm totally open to that once things are sort of underway here and
Yeah.
established, to look into that a little more, because I think supporting like popular mods, I feel like would be a really good thing to do. Like, like versus Sex and Hail, and someone mentioned
Yeah.
Pastime in here. Is that a default mode? I don't think I know what that one is.
So Pastime exists as a game that was built into Team Fortress 2 from around about 2000 and I want to say like 10 or 11 or 12. But it was developed by Bad Robot, and they put a lot of hours in. Like the team that was behind that from the Valve side, put a lot of hours in up until sort of very recently. I think they in 2004, I think they said, right, this is officially out. We're done with no more development going in. And around about the same time, Pastime as a competitive playstyle kicked off that more or less disregarded all of the bad robot code and effectively said, look, we know how we want to have this experience played out. And so Pastime now exists as a tangentially related to original theme Pastime, but actually a much more exciting and more player focused experience for competitive players.
Interesting. I need to look into
Um,
that more because someone mentioned about it potentially being really chaotic in VR. So I want to see what this is all about.
I would definitely. I mean, we've got stuff up on KritzKast YouTube with Pastime on it as well. You can go over there and have a look at it. But yeah, I could imagine a VR version where you're literally flying through the air. I mean, half of the arenas are sky high, and so you get demo men and soldiers just flying through the air with the I think I don't know the name of the ball, but effectively with the snitch, effectively like flying behind you, and you sort of pick it up and throw it in the hoop in the last second. I could imagine that being absolutely mad in any sort of VR environment. And again,
I'm so
I would,
curious.
yeah, very much like to have a bucket beside me if I ever tried that out. So yeah,
That's what we need the vignette for.
yeah, or just a bigger bucket. I don't know, either one. Yeah, I think that's. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I wanted to ask you, particularly the unique things that are the problems that you're likely to encounter or you will encounter. I guess you probably won't know them until you've actually started working on this or even put some severe effort into it.
I will say like it would I think on the most challenging aspect of this I think will be maybe in the networking. And because essentially, not only do I modify the client code, all this stuff right here you're seeing is completely on the client. So
Yep.
you can still host servers, nothing breaks. But yeah, I'm gonna have to modify the actual server code and like take into consideration all these new things like people's like hand positions and like things like that. So I think that's where a lot of the time and effort is gonna go. Just a prediction.
Wow. Okay. Again, I hadn't even thought about this, but I suppose if you've got a from everybody else's perspective, from the other player's perspective, the changes or the movements that you make need to be reflected in what they see.
Yep, that all has to
So
be addressed.
I can imagine like a current Team Fortress 2 server having to keep track of 24 players at any one time as being and feed that information back into whoever is relevant to have that information as being a networking challenge. But as you say, when you as a player have so many additional like data points that are necessary to be transferred over, deciding which ones of those should go to whom when. Yeah, that's an entirely other perspective. Have you had experience working with that kind of relationship with code on your side as a local code, and then having a server respond to it?
Yep,
Or
it's
you have?
not
Okay.
completely unfamiliar territory. It's stuff I've done in Unreal quite a bit over the years. I'll say I've never I don't work in like the games industry per se, but like I do very like practical VR stuff. So this is kind of like my first real time like doing like a game, but the advantage being like I'm not doing it from the ground up. I'm just modding a game I really like.
You work on practical problems.
Yeah, I'm an engineer.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. So I think what I really want to do. This is going to be a much shorter interview than I've done in the past with other people who are working on different projects. But what I think I want to make different this time around is I want to come back to you, say 3 months down the road when you've had a chance to muck around with things and figure things out and decide sort of where your actual pain points are and who you ended up sort of roping into working with you. Is that something you'd be open to?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good time frame. To get kind of to the next milestone.
Ace. I'm not going to let you leave immediately, but I am going to open the floor up a little bit to the people who have been listening in the audience. Mixables is waving their hand furiously.
Okay, so hi, I run the TF2 source mod wiki, and I wanted to ask, since you've said that you've already talked to the Flat2 VR Discord, have you talked to Pink Milk Productions at all, the guy who made the original TF2 VR mod that was based on the old leak from TF Base? It was called Virtual Fortress 2. I know he got a little bit further than the point that you've already gotten in the new SDK on the really old, outdated SDK. So I'm just wondering, has there been any like attempt to contact him and get access to any of his old code or anything to help speed up the process?
Yes, I actually thank you for bringing Pink Milk up, because he was actually the first person I reached out to when getting started on this. Yeah, he was really awesome, and his repo is public, and I basically reached out to him. And I'm like, hey, if you are you interested in like working on this again? And he's definitely someone that if he just came up to me, he's like, hey, I would like to contribute to this. He's definitely like he has a reserved spot because he was the guy to kind of kickstart this back when the source code leaked.
Reaction? I mean, not necessarily just his, but what's the sort of general community reaction been to you doing this?
I feel like it's been positive. I've seen like it seems like there's a lot of interest. I'm glad that first video I made, it seems like a lot of people were a lot more people than I was expecting saw it. So I felt like okay, I'm going in the right direction. This is something I like that should get made. I'm sorry, does that answer your question, Mixer?
Yes, it did. And there was one other thing I was going to ask, but it completely slipped my mind.
Oh, I will also address the Flat VR thing. So I talked to people. I need to talk to Flat VR themselves. I haven't reached out to them to like make a channel for this yet. But I think like after this, I'll be setting up shop. I'll probably make a Twitter account, get that channel started so that people can it can be a little more back and forth, and people can stay in the loop.
Thank you, Mixwells, for the question.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you guys for the podcast.
It's all good. Take care, mate. Oh, RW Wrangler 05 in chat asks that when you're playing as Demoman, it'd be appropriate to have one eye of the headset be disabled.
Maybe as an option, that would be funny.
Yeah,
that would be funny. It wouldn't be hard to do. I mean, so like
all depth perception would be absolutely brilliant.
That does remind me of how the sniper scope works in the contractors mod currently, where like it does that blocks out your other eye.
Oh, does it?
Using it, which is an interesting mechanic, and it's something like there were things when I was playing that mod that I was like, I definitely want to like borrow from this, but there are some things I would definitely change.
Yeah, I was gonna say
really awesome work on that.
Sniping's gonna be a tough one because obviously, as soon as you put the sniper's reticle up, then theoretically you can see something very far away, but you're moving at a different speed to the focus range on the rifle. It's sort of fixed at a long distance. And
it was a tough thing. It was a tough thing to use. I would say doing sniper stuff in VR is kind of tough unless you're have a really steady arm or have some kind of gun attachment for your controllers.
Yeah, it's the other. Yeah, I mean, presumably if you're shooting where you're pointing, but if you're being a sniper, you're expected to be zoomed in for like 3 seconds or 3 minutes or however long it takes to get that headshot in. Yeah, I could see like the physicalities of having to physically move in order to play your role or play your class being very limited for anything other than, I guess, Pyro. I think Pyro is. Well, I imagine Pyro has its own difficulties, what with the flame particles being 90% of what you see half the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely can see there being limitations that things that need to get figure out a way of overcoming them.
Yeah, I think that'll be sniper will be an interesting class to do for sure.
For sure. Even from this small conversation today and all of the ideas that are sparking in my head, and I imagine in other people's heads as well, it sounds like it's going to be possible to do, but by no means easy. And the more you try and fit into it, the more complex it gets, and the more unstuck you're going to get. Almost because Team Fortress 2 is a 17-year-old game now, and it's had so much love and so much attention on it. All I can say to that is good luck. I offer you no support.
I know it'll be a journey.
For sure. Well, thank you very much for coming in. I know that we've spoken about Discord as being something that you're about to set up, or you have set up already. But in the interim, how do people get hold of you, or offer their support, or ask you silly questions about Myopic's site?
Once I get this stuff open, I'll probably just post a little announcement on my Twitter, salad_VR.
Well, absolutely. We'll definitely, as soon as that comes up and running, we'll put out a retweet or a bling. I don't know what the equivalent of that on a blue sky is. A reblue? No, that can't be right. But yeah, we'll definitely draw people's attention to that. But thank you very much for coming in. If there's no other questions from chat, I think we get to call it a day. I think my last closing question to you would be, I don't know who we've got coming on next, but what question should I ask the next group that's coming in?
What is your fondest memory?
Of anything, or just any?
Of anything. So that'll get some interesting answers, I think.
Okay.
Maybe that'll get too personal. I don't know. Try it out.
Can I ask you what your fondest memory of VR is?
Playing through when Half-Life Alyx came out, like during the pandemic, and I played that like start to finish, and it was like that was game changing for me. I could say the same. I would say I would compare that to like playing through like Boneworks for the first time too.
Oh wow, okay.
Like that, those two games really. I think those two games really are kind of like well opened my eyes a bit more. It's like what VR could be. Yeah.
It seems like there is always going to be more questions and more things to ask, but let's store them up and ask them next time you come in.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Agro.
Absolute pleasure. I'll speak to you soon. Take care.
Take care.